Millionaire loses control of the company, but a poor boy emerges with the unimaginable solution. In the midst of chaos, a millionaire humiliated the janitor in front of everyone. What he didn't know was that the man's son was about to change everything. With a flash drive and a lot of courage, the boy prevented the company's destruction. In the end, the one who saved everything wasn't wearing a suit. He wore flip-flops and intelligence. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. On the 20th floor of the imposing Tech USA building, the country's largest technology company, Richard Morgan walked hurriedly through the gleaming corridors. His Italian shoes echoed on the marble floor as he checked the gold watch on his wrist. As CEO of the company, his presence caused a mixture of admiration and fear wherever he went. Employees looked away, others forced smiles. No one dared interrupt his determined march toward the conference room. At the reception desk on the floor, Jack Smith, a middle-aged man with hands calloused from hard work, discreetly cleaned the floor. His simple uniform contrasted with the expensive suits circulating around him. While meticulously polishing every inch, he kept a watchful eye on his son, Michael, a 16-year-old boy who was taking advantage of school vacation to accompany his father to work. Michael wasn't an ordinary teenager. While waiting for his father to complete his tasks, he absorbed everything around him with insatiable curiosity. His perceptive eyes caught details that went unnoticed by most. Self-taught, he had learned programming at age 10 using discarded computers he fixed in his spare time. At the public school where he studied, his teachers didn't know how to deal with his exceptional intelligence. "Dad, can I take a walk around the floor?" "I promise not to bother anyone," Michael asked, adjusting the simple framed glasses on his face. Jack hesitated, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "Son, you know we can't move freely around here. If Mr. Morgan discovers I brought you, I could lose my job. I'll just stay in the common area, I swear. Besides, nobody notices people like us," Michael replied with a sad smile that carried a painful truth. Social invisibility was his daily reality. At that exact moment, Richard Morgan turned the corner, talking loudly on the phone. His face showed concern, something unusual for someone who always displayed unwavering confidence. "I don't care how, I want this problem solved by the end of the day. Tech USA can't afford another server failure. We're losing millions every hour," he vociferated, hanging up abruptly. As he turned, he didn't notice the lunchbox that Jack had discreetly left beside the bucket. In a careless movement, he stepped on it, spreading rice and egg across the freshly cleaned floor. "What the hell is this?" Richard looked down, irritated. Jack hurried over, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my lunch. I'll clean it up immediately." Richard rolled his eyes, impatient. He took some bills from his wallet and threw them on the floor near the broken lunchbox. "Buy another one, and keep your belongings away from people's path." Michael observed the scene, motionless. There was no anger in his gaze, just an acute perception of the injustice he was witnessing. While his father bent down to clean up the mess, the teenager noticed something strange in the behavior of Frank Thompson, the technology director, who arrived hurriedly with a flash drive in his hand. Frank paused briefly, looking at the scene with an almost imperceptible smile before heading toward the server room. Something in that man's look left Michael intrigued. It wasn't compassion or indifference. It seemed like satisfaction. Hours later, while the executives were gathered in the conference room, chaos ensued. Alarms went off throughout the building. Employees ran desperately between workstations. Computer screens flashed with critical error messages. "The main servers are failing. We're losing access to everything," shouted one of the IT technicians, while frantically typing commands on the keyboard. In the conference room, Richard Morgan looked like he was about to explode. "How is this possible? We just updated all the security systems." Frank Thompson, maintaining a studied calm, replied, "It appears to be a very sophisticated external attack, sir. I've already called in our elite team to contain the damage." Outside, Michael carefully observed the security monitors. Something didn't make sense. The failure patterns didn't seem random, as would be expected in a conventional attack. There, was a sequence, almost like a signature. While everyone was running in panic, the young man noticed Frank discreetly entering the secondary server room, a location that shouldn't be a priority during that crisis moment. "Dad," whispered Michael, approaching Jack, who was watching the confusion, trying to remain invisible. "I think there's something strange happening. This isn't the time for your theories, son. We need to stay out of the way." "But Dad, look at Director Thompson. Why is he in the secondary servers when the problem is in the main ones?" Jack looked in the indicated direction. "Maybe he's trying to create an emergency backup." Michael shook his head. "No, backups are automatic and on another floor. He's doing something different." Meanwhile, in the improvised crisis room, Claire Rodriguez, a former security employee who had been fired after warning about vulnerabilities in the system, received an unexpected call. "Claire, it's urgent," said the voice of her former colleague. "Amy, Tech USA is under attack. All systems are going down." Claire sighed, feeling a mixture of vindication and concern. "I warned this would happen. The protocols I suggested would have prevented this." "It's worse than we thought," continued Amy. "I don't have proof, but I suspect it's an inside job." On the other side of the city, in her small apartment, Claire looked at the wall where she had mapped all the security flaws she had identified before being dismissed. Her alerts had been ignored, her professional reputation tarnished. "Richard, Morgan had personally accused her of alarmism and incompetence. Why are you telling me this now?" asked Claire hesitantly. "Because you were the only one who really understood the complete structure of our systems. We need you." Back at Tech USA, the chaos was increasing. Billion-dollar contracts were being suspended, shareholders were calling, demanding explanations, and the press was already sniffing out the scandal. Richard Morgan, always so confident, seemed disoriented. Michael continued observing Frank Thompson. The technology director appeared concerned, but the young man noticed a pattern. Whenever no one was looking, a slight smile formed at the corner of his lips. At the end of the day, when most employees had been dismissed due to the crisis, Jack prepared to leave with his son. "Michael, we need to go. Tomorrow will be another difficult day." "Dad, something very strange is happening. I think someone is sabotaging the company on purpose." "Son, those are serious accusations. We can't get involved in this." Michael looked long at his father, seeing in him the reflection of years of resignation and fear. "What if we could make a difference? What if we had the chance to prove our worth?" Jack placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "Michael, people like us don't change the world. We just survive in it." As they were leaving, Michael saw Frank Thompson leaving the server room with a satisfied expression, carefully putting a flash drive in his pocket. At that moment, a certainty grew inside the young prodigy. The crisis shaking Tech USA wasn't an external attack, but a meticulously orchestrated internal betrayal. And perhaps, just perhaps, the invisible son of a cleaning worker was the only person capable of seeing the truth behind appearances. Night had fallen over New York when Michael returned to the small apartment he shared with his father in the outskirts. While Jack prepared a simple dinner to replace the lost lunch, the young man couldn't stop thinking about the day's events. The images repeated in his mind. The contempt in Richard Morgan's eyes, Frank Thompson's contained smile, the error codes on the computer screens. "Dad, do you have your company badge?" asked Michael, absently moving the rice and beans on his plate. Jack raised his eyes, suspicious. "I do. Why?" "No reason," the young man quickly replied. Too late. His father knew him too well. "Michael, what are you planning?" "We can't get into trouble. This job is all we have." Michael pushed his plate aside and faced his father. "Did you see how that man treated you today? Like you were less than nothing. Like your food, your livelihood, was worth nothing." "That's how the world works, son. People like Richard Morgan were born to command, and people like us to serve," completed Michael, indignant. "I don't believe that, Dad, and I know deep down you don't either." Jack sighed deeply. In his tired eyes was a glimmer of pride for his son, mixed with the fear that accompanies every father who knows he cannot forever protect what he loves most. "What did you see today?" "Really?" Michael moved closer, speaking in a low voice, as if the walls could hear. Frank Thompson is sabotaging the company, I'm sure of it. The failure patterns were too precise, too organized, and he was in the wrong places at the right times. And what do you intend to do? Accuse the technology. Director without proof. I'll get proof, Michael replied with determination in his eyes. Tonight. On the other side of the city, in a luxurious penthouse, Richard Morgan drank whiskey while staring at the panoramic view of New York. His cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. Furious shareholders, desperate. Executives, journalists hungry for information. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. Tech USA, the company he had built from scratch, was on the verge of collapse. A knock on the door interrupted his somber thoughts. Frank Thompson entered, impeccably dressed despite the late hour. "Any news?" asked Richard, without taking his eyes off the window. "The damage is extensive but controllable. I managed to isolate some critical systems before they were compromised." Frank approached, also helping himself to a shot of whiskey. "I have a theory about who might be behind this." Richard turned, interested. "Who?" "Claire Rodriguez." The name caused visible discomfort in Richard. Claire had been his protégé years ago, before she began questioning the company's practices too much. Her dismissal hadn't been friendly. Why would she do this? Frank shrugged, calculatingly casual. Revenge, she was always brilliant, and she knows our systems better than anyone. Find her. I want to speak with her personally. Meanwhile, Claire Rodriguez was analyzing lines of code on her laptop. The call from her former colleague had left her restless. Something in the story didn't make sense. The system she had helped develop had flaws, yes, but not such catastrophic vulnerabilities. Her phone vibrated with an anonymous message. Tech USA is being sabotaged internally. Don't trust Frank Thompson. Claire frowned. Who would send such a message, and why specifically mention Frank? The technology director had always been ambitious, but to deliberately destroy the company he worked for, her train of thought was interrupted by another message. Check the access logs of the secondary servers. Time 2:37 p.m. Back at the small apartment, Michael was silently preparing. He dressed in dark clothes, took his refurbished laptop and some basic tools. His father's badge rested in his backpack, a key to a world that systematically excluded him. "Don't do this, son," begged Jack, standing at the bedroom door. "If they catch you, they can accuse you of intrusion. They can say you caused all this." Michael hugged his father, feeling the familiar smell of detergent on his clothes. "Trust me, Dad. I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing this for us." "For us?" "For all the invisible ones. For all the people who are treated as less than they are." In the dead of night, using his father's badge and his knowledge of the security camera's blind spots, Michael infiltrated the Tech USA building. The building, normally pulsating with activity, was almost deserted. Only a few security guards and emergency technicians remained. With silent steps, the young man navigated the dark corridors until he reached the secondary server room. His heart beat strongly against his chest, but his hands remained steady as he connected his laptop to one of the diagnostic ports. "Let's see what you've been up to, Mr. Thompson," he muttered to himself as his fingers danced over the keyboard, penetrating layer after layer of security. What Michael found confirmed his suspicions. Malicious codes had been strategically implanted in the systems, programmed to cause failures in sequence, creating the illusion of an external attack. But there was more. A routine program to take action in 48 hours, permanently erasing decades of research and intellectual property of the company. "My God," whispered Michael, realizing the magnitude of the sabotage. Quickly, he began copying the evidence to his flash drive. While the files were being transferred, he noticed something curious. All the malicious modules were signed with a code name. Marianne. It seemed personal, intimate. Who could Marianne be? In the luxurious penthouse, Frank Thompson smiled upon seeing a discreet alert on his smartphone. Someone had accessed the secondary servers, exactly as he had planned. Now it was just a matter of time until his trap was triggered. "I need to go," he said to Richard, who continued lost in his somber thoughts. An emergency came up in the servers. Richard nodded distractedly, not noticing the predatory gleam in his supposed ally's eyes. In Claire Rodriguez's small apartment, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. Following the anonymous tip, she had managed to remotely access some backup records. What she saw horrified her. Frank Thompson had systematically created backdoors in the company's systems for months. "Who are you?" Claire typed in response to the anonymous message. "How do you know all this?" The response came almost instantly. "Someone the powerful don't see. I'm in the servers now, collecting evidence. But I think I've been discovered." Back at Tech USA, Michael felt exposed. The lights in the server room had flickered twice, a sign that someone had remotely accessed the security system. He needed to get out of there, and fast. He disconnected his laptop and stored the flash drive with the evidence. As he prepared to leave, he heard footsteps in the corridor. He hid between the rows of equipment, controlling his breathing. Frank Thompson entered the room, accompanied by two men Michael had never seen before. They weren't wearing the company uniform. "Search everything," ordered Frank. "I want to know who dared to enter here." Michael slowly backed away, looking for an escape route. His elbow hit a keyboard, knocking it to the floor with a crash. "There!" shouted one of the men. With no alternative, Michael ran toward the emergency exit. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of his pursuers. His heart was beating frantically as he descended the stairs, jumping several steps at a time. Upon reaching the basement, he found himself in a maze of maintenance corridors. Using his knowledge of the building, acquired during visits with his father, he quickly navigated to a rarely used service door. As he exited into the night air of New York, he didn't stop running. He needed to reach a safe place. He needed to deliver the evidence to the right people. In his pocket, the cell phone vibrated with a message. "Come to 1578 Broadway Avenue, apartment 305, now. Claire Rodriguez." How had this woman gotten his number? Michael hesitated for a moment, but something told him he could trust her. With renewed determination, he headed to the indicated address, carrying with him the evidence that could save Tech USA and, perhaps, forever change his family's destiny. Meanwhile, on the 20th floor of the corporate building, Frank Thompson looked out the window, observing a small figure running down the street. A cruel smile formed on his lips. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "We have an intruder, probably got evidence. Find him and eliminate the problem." What Frank didn't know was that his call had just been recorded. In the corner of the room, a small device placed by Michael continued transmitting everything to a remote server. The truth was beginning to emerge from the shadows, relentless like the dawn approaching on the horizon of New York. Dawn found Claire Rodriguez and Michael Smith hunched over the laptop in the former Tech USA employee's small apartment. The evidence collected by the young man was indisputable. Frank Thompson had not only created the crisis, but was planning something much bigger. "This is brilliant and frightening at the same time," murmured Claire, analyzing the malicious codes. "Frank was always ambitious, but I never imagined he would go this far." Michael carefully observed Claire's every move, still not completely trusting. "How did you know I was in the servers? How did you get my number?" Claire smiled, showing her computer screen. "I created an alert system when I still worked there. Any unauthorized access to the secondary servers notifies me automatically. As for your number, let's say I have my resources." "Why were you fired from Tech USA?" Michael asked directly. Claire's smile disappeared. "Because I tried to do exactly what you did yesterday. I alerted about vulnerabilities in the systems, including some that Frank might be exploiting. Richard Morgan didn't want to listen. Frank convinced everyone that I was paranoid, wanting more power and recognition." Michael nodded, understanding. "And now Frank is using those same vulnerabilities to destroy the company. But why?" Claire hesitated, looking at a file she had just discovered among the evidence collected by Michael. "I think I found something, a personal document. It seems to be a kind of diary." Together, they read the protected file that Michael had managed to access thanks to his exceptional talent. It was a detailed record of Frank's motivations, written as a confession to no one and to everyone at the same time. "My mother, Marianne Thompson, died working as a janitor at the company that preceded Tech USA. Claire read aloud. Richard Morgan was just a mid-level manager at the time. She was pregnant with me when she suffered a fainting spell due to the precarious working conditions. Richard was present and ignored her pleas for help, claiming she was just being dramatic. When she finally received care, it was too late to prevent complications. I was born premature, while she withered away in a hospital bed. I grew up in orphanages, swearing that one day I would make Richard Morgan pay for every moment of suffering. Michael felt a lump in his throat. Frank's story, though tragic, reflected a reality he knew well, the invisibility of workers like his father, treated as disposable by the powerful. Frank doesn't just want to destroy Tech USA, concluded Claire, continuing to read the document. He wants to take control after the fall, reshaping it in his image. The cyber attack is just the beginning. He has shareholders and investors ready to take over when the stock value plummets to the minimum. It's revenge and a corporate takeover at the same time, murmured Michael, impressed by the complexity of the plan. Claire closed the laptop with determination. We need to take this evidence to Richard Morgan immediately. Will he believe us? You whom he fired and me, the son of a janitor. He won't have a choice. The evidence is irrefutable. Meanwhile, in the Smiths' apartment, Jack woke with a start. Michael's bed was empty. The badge had disappeared from the drawer. An icy fear took hold of his body. His son, his pride, and his hope had put himself in danger because of him. Without thinking twice, he got dressed and ran to the bus stop. He needed to get to Tech USA as soon as possible. If Michael was in trouble, he would be there to protect him regardless of the cost. In Richard Morgan's penthouse, the day began with even worse news. Tech USA shares had plummeted 30% at the market opening. The press speculated about imminent bankruptcy. Investors were withdrawing their support en masse. Sir Frank Thompson is on the phone, announced his secretary. Richard answered, running his hand through his grey hair in a gesture of frustration. Frank, where are you? We need you here. I'm resolving the situation, Richard, Frank replied with a studied calm. I discovered something disturbing. It seems that Claire Rodriguez managed to access our systems last night. Richard felt his blood freeze. Claire, are you sure? Absolutely. And she wasn't alone. There was a young man with her, possibly some hired hacker. I'm tracking them now. Bring them to me when you find them, ordered Richard, hanging up afterwards. The executive walked to the window, observing the city he had long considered his personal domain. Something in that story didn't fit. Claire had always been loyal to the company, almost obsessively dedicated. What would have led her to attack what she had previously protected so zealously? Thoughtful, Richard opened a rarely used drawer in his desk. Inside, an old photo showed a group of employees from the small technology company that would eventually become Tech USA. In the front row, a young woman in a cleaning uniform smiled timidly. Marianne Thompson, a name he had been trying to forget for years. Next to the photo, a yellowed newspaper clipping reported the death of an employee after complications in childbirth. The baby had survived. Frank, the same Frank who was now his right-hand man, his trusted person. My God, whispered Richard, as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in his mind. In the center of New York, Claire and Michael walked hurriedly toward the Tech USA headquarters. The flash drive with the evidence was secure in Michael's pocket. They had decided not to trust digital means for communication. Frank would certainly be monitoring. When we get there, let me do the talking, instructed Claire. Richard is proud, but he's not stupid. When he sees the evidence, her words were interrupted by a black car that braked abruptly beside them. Two men quickly got out, the same ones Michael had seen with Frank the night before. Claire Rodriguez? One of them asked with a fake police identification. We need you to come with us for some questioning about a cyber attack. Claire took a step back. You're not police. You work for Frank Thompson. The man smiled coldly. Smart. Now both of you are going to get into the car without making a scene, or things will get very unpleasant. Michael felt the fear growing but maintained his composure. Discreetly, he removed the flash drive from his pocket and let it fall into the gutter as he was pushed into the vehicle. A risky maneuver, but necessary. Inside the car, Claire maintained a firm gaze. Frank won't get what he wants. Other people already know what he did. The man shrugged. Not our problem, we're just messengers. At Tech USA, Jack Smith arrived breathless. His shift would start only in 2 hours, but something told him there was no time to lose. Using his badge, he accessed the nearly empty building due to the crisis. "Mr. Smith," called a familiar voice. It was Amy, the secretary from the 20th floor, one of the few people who had always treated him with respect. "What are you doing here so early?" "My son Michael. Have you seen him around here?" Amy frowned. "Not since yesterday." "Did something happen?" Jack hesitated, unsure about how much he could reveal. He might be in danger. I think he discovered something about what's happening with the company." Amy's expression changed instantly. "Come with me. Now." To Jack's surprise, Amy led him directly to the executive elevator, one he never thought he would use. "Mr. Morgan needs to hear this," she explained, typing an access code. Meanwhile, the car with Claire and Michael arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Frank Thompson was waiting for them, a satisfied smile on his face. Claire, so you never learn, do you?" he commented as the two were forced out of the vehicle. "And you brought a helper this time. Interesting choice." "Why are you doing this, Frank?" asked Claire, keeping her voice firm despite the fear. "Destroying Tech USA won't bring your mother back." Frank's smile faltered for an instant. "This isn't about bringing anyone back. It's about justice. It's about making Richard Morgan feel what it's like to lose everything he built." Michael took a step forward, surprising everyone. "Your mother wouldn't want this." Frank turned to him, surprised. "What do you know about my mother, kid?" "I know she was a worker, like my father. People who sacrifice themselves daily for a minimum wage, treated as invisible by the powerful. I know she probably dreamed of a better future for you." "Is this the future she wanted? You becoming exactly like the man you hate?" The words hit Frank like a punch. For a moment, his mask of coldness fell, revealing the pain he had carried for decades. "You don't understand," he murmured. "Richard Morgan needs to pay. And he will pay," Michael replied with conviction. "But not like this, not by destroying the livelihood of thousands of innocent families." In the Tech USA penthouse, Richard Morgan faced Jack Smith with a mixture of incredulity and growing understanding. "Your son believes Frank is sabotaging the company?" he asked, trying to process the information. "Yes, sir," replied Jack, gathering all his courage. "Michael is very intelligent. If he says he saw something wrong, then there really was something wrong." Richard walked to the window, thoughtful. The photo of Marianne Thompson still weighed on his conscience. Had his arrogance of the past created the monster that now threatened to destroy everything he had built? "Amy," he finally called, "contact security. I want Frank Thompson located immediately, and track the city's security cameras. Look for Claire Rodriguez and..." He turned to Jack. "What's your son's name?" Michael Smith." Richard nodded, a renewed determination in his eyes. "Find Michael Smith and send the FBI to accompany now." In the abandoned warehouse, the confrontation between Frank, Claire, and Michael was interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance. The men hired by Frank looked at him, awaiting instructions. "Go away," ordered Frank. "Now, leave no traces." As the men fled, Frank drew a gun from his waist. "It won't be so easy for you." Claire positioned herself protectively in front of Michael. "Don't do this, Frank. There's still time to fix things." Michael, however, remained calm. "The flash drive with the evidence against you is no longer with me. It's on its way to Tech USA right now." Frank's face paled. "You're bluffing." "I'm not, and you know what else? The virus you programmed to destroy the company's data in 48 hours. I neutralized it last night, but I left a trail to make it look like it's still active." Claire looked at Michael with admiration. The young prodigy had done much more than she had imagined during that nocturnal intrusion. Frank pointed the gun directly at Michael's chest, his hand trembling slightly. "Why? Why would a kid, the son of a janitor, risk himself like this for a company that treats his father like garbage?" Michael held Frank's gaze without fear. Because I believe we can change things, not by destroying but by transforming. My father taught me that there is dignity in honest work, even when we don't receive due recognition. He taught me that our humanity is not in the position we occupy, but in the choices we make. The sirens were approaching. Frank looked around. Desperate, the gun still pointed at Michael and Claire. "It's over, Frank," said Claire softly. "Choose the right path now." For a tense moment, the fate of the three hung on the tip of a needle. Then slowly, Frank lowered the gun, silent tears streaming down his face. "She deserved more," he whispered, more to himself than to the others. Marianne Thompson deserved more than dying forgotten because of a man's arrogance. "And you can honor her memory by doing the right thing now," replied Michael, extending his hand to Frank, not with revenge, but with true justice. When the authorities finally burst into the warehouse, they found an unexpected scene. Frank Thompson sitting on the floor, defeated, while Claire and Michael calmly waited. The gun was far away, forgotten in a corner. The long night of conspiracy, pursuit, and revelations was coming to an end. But for Michael, Claire, Jack, and even for Richard Morgan, the dawn brought not just the end of a crisis, but the beginning of a profound transformation that none of them could have predicted. A week had passed since Frank Thompson's arrest. In the corridors of Tech USA, a different silence hung in the air. It was no longer the silence of arrogance and indifference, but the reflective silence that precedes great transformations. The company had survived the storm, but nothing would be the same again. On the 20th, Floor Richard Morgan observed the city through the panoramic window of his office. On his desk, the old photograph where Marianne Thompson smiled timidly now occupied a prominent place, a constant reminder of the price of arrogance. "Mr. Morgan," called Amy from the door. "They've arrived." Richard took a deep breath, adjusting his tie. This would not be an easy meeting, but it was necessary. "Send them in." Jack and Michael Smith entered the office, both visibly uncomfortable in that luxurious environment. Claire Rodriguez accompanied them, her professional posture masking the nervousness she felt upon returning to the place from where she had been expelled. "Please, sit down," invited Richard, indicating the leather chairs in front of his desk. "First of all, I want to personally thank you for what you did. You saved not only Tech USA, but possibly thousands of jobs." Jack looked at his son with contained pride. Michael, in turn, kept his eyes fixed on Richard, studying every nuance of his expression. "We didn't do it for you or the company," the young man replied frankly. "We did it because it was the right thing to do." Richard nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "And that's precisely the lesson I needed to learn." He stood up, walking to the window again. "I spent decades building this company, transforming it into a technological powerhouse. But in the process, I forgot something fundamental." "What?" asked Claire, curious. "That companies are not made of technology, patents, or contracts. They are made of people." He turned to face the three, people whom I systematically treated as replaceable pieces in a big machine. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair, recalling years of cold and indifferent treatment. "Sir, if I may, why did you call us here today?" Richard returned to the desk, sitting with a less imposing posture than usual. "To propose a change, a transformation in Tech USA that begins today, with you." In the days that followed, Tech USA became the stage for a silent revolution. Jack Smith was promoted to Director of Building Infrastructure, responsible for supervising the entire maintenance and cleaning team, with authority to implement improvements in working conditions. His wife, Lisa, who had always dreamed of completing the studies she had interrupted to support the family, received a full scholarship to study education. The couple's youngest son, Peter, was transferred to a school of excellence with all expenses paid by the company. As for Michael, Richard offered him a position in the newly created Young Talents program with unlimited access to the company's educational resources and direct guidance from the best specialists. The only condition was that the young man complete his formal education and use his talent to develop technologies with positive social impact. "I don't just want to repay what you did," explained Richard during a meeting with the Smith family. "I want to correct decades of injustice and blindness." Claire Rodriguez was reintegrated into the company with honors, assuming the position of Director of Cybersecurity. Her first task was to completely redesign the security protocols, implementing many of the suggestions that had been ignored in the past. On a rainy afternoon, Richard received a sealed envelope. It was a letter from Frank Thompson, sent from the prison where he awaited trial. For long minutes he stared at the envelope, unsure whether to open it. Finally, gathering courage, he broke the seal. "Richard," the letter began, "I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I offer it for what I did. Some wounds are too deep to be healed with words. What I did was unforgivable, driven by a hatred that consumed decades of my life. But there is something you should know. Marianne Thompson, my mother, never wanted revenge." In her diary, found among her belongings after her death, she wrote that her greatest wish was for me to have opportunities she never had. "In my obsession with revenge, I betrayed her true legacy. It may be too late for me, but it's not too late to honor her memory properly." Richard read and reread the letter several times, silent tears streaming down his aged face. Finally, he took a blank sheet and began to write his response. He did not offer easy forgiveness or absolution, but proposed a path of reparation. All the money Frank would receive from his participation in the company would be directed to an assistance fund for employees in vulnerable situations, named after Marianne Thompson. In the following weeks, Tech USA underwent a profound restructuring. Empty rooms were transformed into living and development spaces. A broad scholarship program was implemented for employees' children. The cafeteria, previously separated by hierarchy, became a single space where executives and cleaning staff shared the same tables. Michael, in his new role, led the development of revolutionary software that allowed identifying hidden talents within the company itself, regardless of formal academic training or position held. The project, named Invisible Gaze, soon became a reference in the technological market. On a special afternoon, the Smith family was invited to dinner at Richard Morgan's house. The invitation, handwritten by the executive himself, expressly asked that they not consider it a professional obligation, but a meeting between people who had learned important lessons from each other. In the spacious kitchen of the mansion, Richard surprised everyone by putting on an apron and beginning to prepare the dinner himself. "Today, no chefs or employees," he explained. "I want to cook something special for you myself." To everyone's astonishment, the main dish was rice with egg, a silent tribute to the crushed lunchbox that had triggered the whole story. "Why this?" asked Lisa, touched as she recognized the symbolism. Richard served the plates personally, with a humility he had never demonstrated before. "Because I needed to remind myself that there is no food without dignity, that the food prepared with love by someone for their family deserves the same respect as the most sophisticated plate from a starred restaurant." During dinner, the social barriers that would normally separate those people fell completely. They talked about dreams, fears, hopes. Michael spoke about his future projects. Peter proudly showed his report card from the new school. Lisa shared her emotion upon returning to studies after so many years. Jack, usually reserved, surprised everyone by telling stories from his childhood in the countryside, revealing a deep wisdom that had always been there, just waiting to be heard. At the end of the night, Richard invited everyone to the veranda where they could observe the illuminated city below. "Look at New York," he said. "Millions of lights, millions of stories. For how long did I look at this view and only see numbers, business opportunities, market challenges? I didn't see the real people behind the statistics." Michael approached, standing beside the executive. "There's still time to change that." Richard looked at the young man who had transformed not only his company, but his own worldview. "You know that I offered a substantial financial reward to your family for what you did, and you refused. Why?" Michael smiled, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "Because some things are priceless, Mr. Morgan. Respect can't be bought. Dignity is not for sale. True recognition doesn't come in the form of a check, but in real changes." Those words hit Richard deeply. Throughout his business life, he had become accustomed to solving problems with money, to quantifying everything in monetary values. Now he finally understood what he had lost in the process. The following week, Tech USA publicly announced its new corporate philosophy. It wasn't just about public relations or social marketing. They were profound structural changes that redefined the company's relationship with its collaborators at all levels. Michael's Invisible Gaze program identified dozens of hidden talents in the lowest ranks of the corporate hierarchy: a security guard who was a self-taught programmer, a receptionist with remarkable interface design skills, a driver who had developed a route optimization algorithm superior to those used by the company. Claire implemented a revolutionary cybersecurity system that became a reference in the market, receiving millionaire proposals from other companies that she refused with a smile. "My mission is here," she explained when questioned about her renewed loyalty. In a symbolic gesture, Richard transformed the 20th floor, previously exclusive territory of top management, into a collaborative space open to all employees. His own office, drastically reduced, had glass walls, a physical metaphor for the transparency he now sought to implement in all aspects of the company. 6 months after the crisis, Tech USA had not only recovered financially, but reached a new level of success. Paradoxically, by prioritizing people above immediate profit, the company had become even more profitable and innovative. In a special ceremony, Richard Morgan took the stage to announce the inauguration of the Marianne Thompson Foundation, dedicated to identifying and developing talents in low-income communities. By his side, proud, were Jack, Lisa, Peter, and Michael Smith. "Today we celebrate not just business success," said Richard to the microphone. "We celebrate a fundamental lesson about humanity. For decades, I built a company focused on technology and innovation, forgetting that behind each line of code, each product, each contract, there are real people with dreams, pains, and incredible potential." From the front row, Michael observed the complete transformation of that man who, months earlier, had humiliated his father by trampling his lunchbox. There was no revenge in his heart, only the satisfaction of witnessing a genuine change. "Our society has created systems that make some people invisible," continued Richard. "We ignore the doorman who greets us every morning, the person who cleans our offices, the delivery person who brings our lunch. We don't see their stories, their talents, their humanity. Tech USA made that mistake for a long time. I made that mistake. But thanks to extraordinary people who had the courage to show us a different path, today we can start again." At the end of the ceremony, as the guests dispersed for the cocktail, Richard discreetly approached Michael. "I have one last question," said the executive. "What would you do if you were in my place? If you had all this power and resources at your disposal?" Michael reflected for a moment, his eyes shining with the intensity of visionaries. "I would build bridges where there are walls. I would create systems that recognize value beyond diplomas and surnames. I would invest in technology that serves humanity, not that replaces or exploits it." Richard smiled, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder. "Then that's exactly what we'll do together." In Tech USA's main control room, where once the chaos of sabotage had almost destroyed everything, a different energy now pulsated. The screens displayed data from innovative projects. Diverse teams collaborated in harmony. In the center of it all, a small frame enclosed a photo of a simple lunchbox containing rice and egg, a silent symbol of the revolution that had transformed not just a company, but the lives of all who were part of it. In prison, Frank Thompson received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from Richard, but from Michael. "Your mother would be proud of the positive legacy her name now carries," the letter said. "When you get out of here, there will be an opportunity to start over, not out of pity or obligation, but because we believe that all people deserve a second chance to choose a better path." And so a story that had begun with humiliation and contempt transformed into a journey of redemption and renewal. Not by magic or coincidence, but by the courage of those who, even being considered small and invisible by the world, carried within themselves a light that no arrogance could extinguish. In the living room of his new house, acquired with his fair salary as infrastructure director, Jack Smith contemplated a framed photograph, his family gathered with Richard Morgan at the launch of the Marianne Thompson Foundation. In his eyes, there was no longer the fear of someone who feels inferior, but the serene glow of someone who is finally seen and valued in his complete humanity. Michael, now coordinator of the Young Talents program, dedicated his afternoons to visiting public schools in the outskirts, identifying potentials that, like his, could be lost in social invisibility. Extraordinary talents are in unexpected places, he explained to teachers. We just need to have eyes to see beyond appearances. And Richard Morgan, the powerful executive who had learned the most valuable lesson of his life through the humility of a simple family, had finally found something that decades of business success had not provided him: inner peace and true purpose. Tech USA, once a symbol of cold corporate efficiency, had become an example of humanized innovation. Its corridors, previously silent and impersonal, now pulsated with the vibrant energy of diversity and genuine collaboration. And it had all begun with a simple rice with egg, trampled by arrogance, but transformed into the seed of a silent revolution. That proved a universal truth. Greatness is not in the power exercised over others, but in the ability to recognize the intrinsic dignity in every human being, regardless of their social position. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Michael, Jack, and Richard has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this exciting experience, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving stories that explore themes of transformation and humanity. Find it here by clicking to the left of the video. If this narrative awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to this video. Daily we bring unique stories that reveal the complexity and beauty of human life in all its dimensions. Don't miss our next content and share with us in the comments how this story resonated with your own experiences. After all, we have all